taken cognizance of city as an entity, as a polluter, but also as an entity whose vulnerability is getting enhanced enormously because of impact of climate change. So if you look at what IPCC is saying about cities, obviously about the urban boom that is going to happen, but clear focus is on vulnerability of cities today. So it is just not the mitigation, that cities have to be part of the mitigation, but vulnerability and climate related. So, and it has crunched numbers and shown that because of climate change, extreme weather events, and all the climatic stress, how the economic burden is increasing on urban economy, climate impacts, and it's really interesting right from the beginning what we are constantly reinforcing, that this time IPCC is so sharp on equity, vulnerable groups, the marginalized. And even in the case of cities, they are saying that how the impacts are going to fall disproportionately on economically and socially marginalized groups. And they are talking about that it's important, therefore, that you design the infrastructure for resilience. And there are numbers to show that if there is an urban heat island, for instance, that is it's a big impact, but even local impact can be enormous, that even local temperature rise can be as high as 2 degrees. And cities and settlements, therefore, they need to take account when they do their planning. But it is also saying that a lot of this vulnerability is emerging because cities are now expanding to more vulnerable ecological zones, like the coastal areas that are vulnerable to flooding, to landslides. And that's the urban expansion that is all about. And the message, the take of the message from that IPCC report is that while we are trying to reduce climate risk, but we are also missing out on the opportunity of the co-benefit. That's another very powerful principle of IPCC report this time, that how you combine mitigation with adaptation with sustainable development, and while you try and reduce inequality and improve well-being. So keeping that in mind, and taking that as a context, it's very clear that the cities have to be central to this whole 1.5 degree stabilization agenda that we are talking about. And cities that are a big part of the global economy and the huge amount of emissions. And that is a departure because traditionally we have always been tracking changes in emission trend from the polluters, bracketing them as manufacturing, energy production. But when you shift your focus to city as a polluter, then you are also taking on consumption, because cities are about consumption, cities are about lifestyle, and that is therefore, we have to therefore reduce the resource footprint and improve resource efficiency. Now, the reason why we feel that there is an opportunity today, even though urban story is turning out to be a disaster, but urban story can also become an opportunity, because the enormous the investments that are flowing in today for urban infrastructure. And this is something that it can, like, just look at these two numbers. At a global level, what they're saying is that 75% of global urban infrastructure that will be there in 2050 is yet to be built. And look at India. We are saying 60% of India is yet to be built. Now, it can therefore either an opportunity or a disaster, depending on how you're going to make that India, right? And that's why it is so important for us to discuss this today. So all the committed and augmented financing of urban infrastructure, therefore, has to come under a microscope for all of us. Now, cities as a polluter, but cities that are vulnerable, and this story we have said again and again, that it is just not the extreme climate weather, the weather events, but it is also the way you are designing the city, the way you are designing the infrastructure, which is also enhancing the vulnerability. Because if you are encroaching into the riparian zone of a river or the ecological space of the city, then you are certainly disrupting the drainage channel. And that's why today you have the Gurugram flood, Chennai flood, Mumbai flood, and that's where we are today. So how will cities contribute to India's promise of decarbonization? So that billion-ton reduction, carbon reduction. So how will cities contribute to that? Now, in that, what we are saying that can we reimagine our city? Can we reinvent our city? And that reinvention will have to happen around several verticals. So one clearly around the whole mobility transition, the urban commuting pattern in the city, that will have to be reinvented. Energy transition for efficiency and sufficiency. The whole circular economy, and there is a lot of discussion that's going to happen today in this session, and that how do you close the loop around wastewater and solid waste in the city? And the equity in space, it is just it's very easy to, it's kind of, becoming, we are picking up these keywords when we talk in the context of climate, that we need equity. But when we are doing urban planning, we see huge amount of gentrification happening today. We don't pay attention to equity. And then sustainable consumption. So now there are so many elements here. We will just take two examples of mobility and the built structure, because how the buildings are happening where we live, where we work. So if you look at the mobility transition today, again, IPCC, what it said in this report, very clear that the transportation infrastructure is hugely vulnerable, and the mobility transition must happen to improve mobility and accessibility for the people. We have to reduce vehicle miles traveled and vehicle-based emissions. And therefore, walking, cycling, public infrastructure, public transport infrastructure will have to be the defining parameter. Now, when you look at the transport sector CO2 emissions globally and in India, both show that the transportation is the second highest emitter of CO2 emissions. And this is something that we really have to keep in mind. It is not an emission that is going to be easy to tame. And when you're looking at taming of the energy guzzling in India, when you're looking at that, it is going to be tough at the rate at which the energy demand from the road transport is growing and oil demand is growing. And it is just not passenger transport. We know that the freight transport is also contributing enormously to that growth. And therefore, how do we address that? What is interesting for India and what International Energy Agency is telling us is that the energy use in the transport sector is going to grow phenomenally, but it is the road sector in India that is going to dominate that, which is very different from the global scenario. In the Western world, the share of the road transport has come down and the share of marine and aviation have gone up. But in India, we are still at that stage where it's the road transport that is taking over. Now, when you're looking at from the core benefit of Indian cities, today we talk about air pollution and we also talk about now the carbon impacts. What the projections are showing that in the coming decade, there is going to be a reduction in the air pollutants, which are toxic and harmful. But what is going to increase phenomenally is the greenhouse gas, the CO2 emission from the transport sector. So how do we therefore combine the agenda so that you see a combined reduction of both? And the biggest opportunity for CO2 reduction, what IEA is saying in India, is in the freight and by reducing dependence on cars. That has to be the focus of moving forward. Now, when we looked at the UNEP's emission gap report that they bring out every year, looking at where are the gaps in action to be able to reduce the emissions, what they're showing that during pandemic, because of the whole shutdown, closure of the economy, there was a dent even in the greenhouse gas emissions globally. But the very recent UNEP gap emission report is showing that it is bouncing back. And not only that, what they are saying that all the economic recovery packages globally, what they are funding in the transportation sector, most of it is the traditional transport, that is road-based transport and the road infrastructure. So that means that you are going to lock in more pollution and carbon in the future. And that therefore the competitive spending on sustainable mode is still much less. Now, in this, therefore, now here, this is a very important crossroad because globally, when you look at the Western world, the rich world, we know that there the car ownership is already very high, 700 to 800 cars per thousand people in US and Australia. But what they're saying that in the coming decade is going to change, and change because in the Western world, you're going to see degrowth. So the population is going to stabilize and decline. Even economy is also not going to grow that big. I mean, they are overall big, but the relative growth is going to be low. And as a result, but the growth is going to happen in our part of the world, Asia. And therefore, are we prepared for this? In fact, IPCC is saying that the light duty vehicle travel per capita is already high in rich world, but that is going to peak around 2035 and begin to decline in the rich world, but is going to increase in our part of the world. Now, the strategies that globally everyone is looking at, what is interesting, that the global action is primarily focused on the electrification and fuel economy improvement on vehicles. That is more technology-centric change. So that's why if you go to US today, to Europe today, they are talking about electrification. They're talking about making their vehicles more fuel efficient. But if you look at all the other strategies here, including mobility management, that how people travel, it is not that strong, even in the rich world. And the zero emission transition is beginning to pick up. Europe is certainly showing much bigger improvement. In fact, this year, what they're saying, for the first time in the world, in Europe, the share of electric vehicle in the new sale is higher than internal combustion engine. So the change has started. But India is still far behind. Now, one is the technology agenda for us, and the other is the mobility agenda. Now, when we look at India and look at the census of India 2011, it must have changed quite a bit since then, but this is the latest available, how people commute in our cities. And it's showing that majority walk, cycle, and use public transport even today in India. That we know. But if this is the baseline that we have, then how do we build on that baseline? But the unfortunate story is that instead of improving that baseline, what we are seeing is the erosion of the baseline. So today, if you look at one is the indicator is the bus transport and how steadily, even when travel demand is increasing, bus ridership is declining. Clearly, we are not investing enough in modernizing the system. If you look at the mass transit, whether you're looking at metro system or a BRT system, except those few cities, Ahmedabad, Surat, Amritsar, showing some change, and metro in some cities, it kind of plateaued. It's just, mass transport is not expanding in this country at all. Very small numbers. Therefore, it is all about car-centric road design. It is about designing road to give advantage to the movement of the vehicle, not for the movement of the people. So that, and then a lot of hidden subsidy for the car, including free parking to everything else, and urban sprawl, which is undermining the compact city urban form that Indian cities have. So as a result, the distances are continuously increasing. So how do we change that? So this is the big agenda that we are looking at to forward, but understand from the mistakes of the developed world, who first built their freeways and the expressways, and now they're destroying it, right? And here we are repeating their mistake. They are undoing their mistake, but we are repeating their mistake, but it is too expensive for us to undo. So therefore, we have to rationalize and shift this budget that we are spending here for the sustainable transport. So therefore, scaling up public transport, walking, cycling, and restraint on vehicles and freight management, more shift towards railways, those are going to be some of the big ticket change that we are looking for. And the next final section that I just want to touch upon very quickly for decarbonization agenda, which is about reducing the carbon in the build structure, the building where you are, right? And again, what IPCC is saying, that climate risk that is going to increase, of course, with warming and with higher heat index. Our dependence on cooling and mechanical cooling is going to increase. Our buildings are going to get more and more designed for air conditioning. And therefore, all these buildings are going to become huge heat and carbon trappers. And that's what we have to undo. Now, looking at the way in the construction industry is taking off in India, we certainly have to set the terms of that change. Just this one fascinating analysis that shows for Delhi, that, when during summer, when, oh, right. It's gone? No. See? Oh, yeah. Sorry. So what it shows is that as long as the heat index is between 20 to 30 degrees, we kind of adapt ourselves with our fan, by opening the window, by changing our clothes. But the moment the heat index exceeds 30 degrees in Delhi, right, just see how it spirals electricity consumption. Right? And it is all reflection of air conditioning. And we have found in Delhi that the peak electricity demand during midnight in summer can be higher than the afternoon peak. Right? And midnight, when your offices, your retail are all shut. That's the impact. And we are talking about here energy efficiency, we are talking about power plants, we are talking about, but not paying attention to the consumption and its impact, right? So now, COVID actually has really hit the bullseye with it, because what is fascinating that, remember when we had the COVID pandemic happening, the advisory that came from the principal scientific advisor, PMO, they said that even if you're switching on your air conditioner, keep your window open. Right? Even though it is very energy inefficient thing to do. But the message is very clear. You have to design your building for daylight, for ventilation, for free flow air, which will not only improve overall energy efficiency, but improve thermal comfort of the building so that you can reduce your air conditioned hours, which is important. We are not saying eliminate air conditioning, but you have to eliminate the air conditioned hours. Now, that's the message that we have. Now, when you see, but what is happening today, the way we are building in our cities, if I asked you, can you, by just looking at the building, can you tell me which city this building belongs to, right? But look, this is Chandigarh, this is Gurugram, this is Mumbai, this is Kolkata, this is Chennai, this is Bangalore, this is Noida. It's such a vastly different climatic conditions, right? And yet we are building it same everywhere. And the glass house trapping heat, okay, and making use of air conditioner absolutely necessary, right? But we are like, if I just look at this, and I'd love to give this, like whoever is here from Kolkata, Newtown, Kolkata, there's an ONGC building, glass house, right? And it is totally cut off from the climatic advantages of that area. But the vernacular local architecture is all about, ventilation, air, and light. But we are not adapting that in the new buildings, right? So the other big challenge is now, because of the mass housing and Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, government giving so much of incentive now to the real estate bodies. So they are now adopting all this new material. These are all prefab material. They are not brick and mortar anymore. But what is happening is that while they are taking it up because these are very easy to build, very fast track. You will hear all these stories about a 10-story building in Mohali that got built in 40 days, right? It's all because of that fast-paced construction, right? Now, what is interesting is that the industry is adopting those material, even though they are more expensive than concrete and brick and mortar. But because they save on labor time, they save on their loan interest because the time is shrunk, right? So they still prefer. Now, if you're adopting that, but without thermal comfort features, then that means you're really making heat magnets all across. And whoever lives there will become a captive user of air conditioner. So therefore, when we did a reality check of some of the mass housing, and we checked those things, that whether they are designed for adequate daylight or not, adequate ventilation or not, and we found no. Even if technically an individual building may meet the norms and the standards, but in the layout and the cluster, because buildings share each other. And as a result, there's a lot of, they just don't meet the benchmark. So there are which means that today the incentives that we are giving to the real estate industry to make affordable housing, if they are not linked with performance on thermal comfort, right? If that money is not performance linked, then we are going to be in deep trouble. So they are getting extra FAR, they are getting a lot more loan, the subsidy, all that interest subvention, TDR, all of that, but these are not linked to performance. And that's where we really need to move. But we have seen innovation. The progressive architects now, they are picking up and learning from the traditional architecture and adapting them to the building. So the Jali work of Rajasthan, right? Just see how they are getting adapted. And Jali is a very simple concept, because Jali means you're forcing the air to shrink and go through the Jali and then come out. And that heat exchange happens and it loses the heat, right? And the air gets cool. Just go and stand by a Jali. You will feel the cool air, right? That's what we really need to build into our thing. And the final couple of points that I just want to say, that when the pandemic hit and we saw the migrant crisis, that was the first time the invisible masses became visible. We never knew where they lived. None of us ever realized that. And then we realized how unlivable their houses was. But that forced the government to create a new vertical on rental housing under PMAY, because they realized that for this category of people, they don't buy houses, right? The affordable housing that you make, but they prefer a dormitory. They make rental, where they just pay and just spend and they go away, right? So for the first time, we are formalizing that building typology. But if it is a rental, that means they are not going to own it. Someone else is going to own it. But then the responsibility then has to be on that owner to provide the thermal comfort for them, right? So this will have to become part of that. When we looked at the PMAY, that is another vertical where government gives incentive for self-built houses, not what real estate construction industry builds. So like you and me, if we are of a certain income category, then we get money and subsidy from the government to build our own houses. Now there's a huge opportunity to inform that as well. And it's fascinating to see how in the slum areas of Dharavi, Mangolpuri, there, where the professional architects are now going and helping them out. You know, in Brazil, in Thailand, governments are giving subsidy to the architects to provide support to the poor people to build houses. So just see the small shanties, if you just redesign them, give them a nice architectural wisdom that how to do that. Just look at the use of daylight and the ventilation in those same houses that otherwise they build in the slum areas. So that's a huge amount of opportunity that we are doing. And the final point is that was about building. But now you have all been in the ATI campus and you have gone around and seen that how not a single drop of wastewater flows out of this campus, right? And we capture each and every drop of rainwater within the campus. Now that's exactly what Atin and his team will talk about, that how do you build for circularity, for resource sufficiency and resource autonomy, right? And it is that decentralized system that has to become that where the waste is a resource and you retain and recover the resource and the material from the waste, and that you close the loop. And that has to get built into the system. And that's what is now, that those kind of policies are emerging. But what we are finding that again, the operational framework is still very weak. And it is possible to do it, so doable. And if we can do that, then today all the battle that we are fighting about dirty Yamuna or the waste all over the place, all of that can get fixed. So that's what we need to look at. In fact, this is the CND waste today in Delhi, which goes to the recycling plant and they make new material out of it. In fact, you may know that the new Supreme Court building in Pragati Maidan, they have actually used 1.8 million recycled CND waste blocks, right? Now, these are the emerging good practices that we really need to keep in mind. So my final message to you all is that we have to reimagine city. The new urban agenda has to be for clean air and carbon neutral goals. Therefore, which means that the city, state, climate action plan, they will have to therefore look at how to transform mobility, the urban form, and provide for all the sustainable resource management practices that are important. We need an urban adaptation plan, and all our infrastructure will have to be calibrated against the extreme weather events. We need urban form-based code, which means that we do not sprawl. In fact, for new development around station areas, railway station areas in Delhi, in India, they've already adopted that code, which means that you do not create gated community, but mixed income, mixed use, planned community, but you keep them compact, make them near the transit lines, within 400-meter radius of a metro station. So all these things are needed so that it's the urban planning, mobility planning, all of that come together. And with that, we need an inclusive urban transition. You have to provide for the poor people in that planning. You just can't throw them out of the city. And that's what IPCC report is saying. And so therefore, all these changes that we are looking for have to be now built into the planning process. And this has to be measurable, verifiable, so that we know that we are not locking in more carbon and pollution intensity in the built environment. So that's the context of the conversation that we are going to have now. So with that, I'll end here. And now we will begin our the conversation on the theme. And I'll just stop sharing. Right. So now we already have with us Mr. Abhay Nag and Mr. Hari Nag from RIGHTS. And RIGHTS, which you know, is part of the development arm of the railways. But what is interesting is that how RIGHTS is now getting increasingly involved with the environment management of the new transportation projects. And that's something that we really want to understand from them. So without wasting any more time, yes, Mr. Negi and Mr. Hari, please, yes, go ahead.
Good evening, all to all. I am Abhay Negi, and with me I have my colleague, Mr. Hari Nag. We have been given a mandate to just compress our presentation in 10 minutes, and we'll try our best to do that. So our topic of the presentation is focusing on climate change in transport, since we are transport consultants. I think we all know climate change.
Yes, Mr. Negi, it would be very nice if you can flag off, all your projects and the work that you have done.
Definitely, ma'am.
That will be very helpful.
Definitely, ma'am. It'll at the end of the presentation we have that. So we'll just quickly go through the slides. Climate change, we all know, is the long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns, and has substantial implications on the environment, society, and economy. The various factors in which we see them is rising temperatures, drought, rising temperatures. We can see this picture of Wayanad in Kerala. The average temperatures in February have increased from about 18 degrees to around 28 degrees within a span of 6 years. We have increasing instances of bushfires and forest fires all over the world. Drought has been increasingly evident across Africa. In Ethiopia, over the past 20 years, 20% increase in malnutrition has been observed. Severe cases, aberrations such as Maharashtra, we observed in 2021 when a special train had to be commissioned to transport water to Latur district, which was the first time ever. Shifting of rainfall pattern. In Cherrapunji, which used to be the wettest place on earth, suddenly within 20 years, it lost that title. And so we have instances in which rainfall patterns in Northeast India are decreasing. And we have instances like the continental US, which since the mid-90s has seen increasing instances of hurricane and flooding. Cloud bursts have been happening in Uttarakhand. Melting of glaciers, again, Nanda Devi Glacier in 21, just part of it melted and we had flash floods. We have flash floods and the melting of glaciers. It's estimated that about 23 trillion tons of ice has melted since the mid-90s. Rising of sea level. Now, this is one of the most prominent and very evident instances of climate change and the most impacting. Like Jakarta, this photograph on the left we see is Jakarta, which is primarily because of rising sea levels and also its own development issues. It is sinking at the rate of 7 inches per year, which has resulted in the necessitating the shifting of the capital city itself. And in India also, a lot of coastline developments would be impacted. It is estimated that due to the over the next 3 decades, about 30 crore people settlements which they are inhabiting would be affected by the chronic flooding line. And by 2100, in the business as usual scenario, about 20 crore people could be affected because of the rise in the high tide line. So these are just some examples of the way climate change is impacting us. So this has been recognized globally, and since 1988, when the IPCC was launched, till the Paris Agreement.
Mr. Nege, may I make a small request? Yes. Because we are very keen to hear about the projects that you have taken up, because we have already discussed a lot of these things.
Yeah, I'm coming to that.
That will be very helpful.
Yeah. So coming to, okay, these are the Indians' commitments, and COP26, okay, we have all discussed. Now coming to climate change in transport networks. Now, as you already mentioned, transport is responsible of 23% of the world energy greenhouse emissions. And in India itself, transport accounts for about 18% of the total energy consumption. And the road sector is the fastest growing. Now, the transport sector CO2 reduction, these are the possible measures in innovative vehicle technology, sustainable transport, fuels, consumer information, legal instruments. RITES is active in the field of sustainable transport, which primarily includes smart growth principles of promoting walk, bike, shorter car trips, basically optimizing your urban mobility, promotion of public transport, route optimization, and shifting of transport mode for goods and passengers as well to more energy efficient modes. The improved infrastructure is part of that, promotion of public transport, including electric mobility, compact development, last mile connectivity, TOD to reduce the carbon footprints. Okay, these are the sustainable development goals, out of which the sustainable habitat is the goal in which sustainable transport comes. And okay, so if we talk about rights, as you all know, it was established in 1974 under the Ministry of Railways. It's a leading transport consultant, and we do a lot of comprehensive transport planning and mass transit projects to promote use of energy efficient modes of transport. And of all our studies, and EIA is a key component to ensure appropriate mitigation strategies for negative impacts during the design stage of the transport projects. We also have REMC Limited, a joint venture of Ministry of Railways and RITES, which is an active player in promoting renewable energy sector, especially in rail transport. So various units of RITES are involved in projects such as strategic planning for improving, upgrading transport systems and optimizing mobility needs, comprehensive mobility planning studies for urban areas to guide the direction in which the transport in the city should grow, and covering the urban transport and an integrated planning process to optimize the travel needs. We have done a lot of mass transit studies, which are again energy efficient modes of transport, more than 20 such studies across India. We also focus on other energy efficient transport modes such as water transport and ropeways, and in renewable energy. So just an estimated that of all the studies that we have done, projected energy reduction and CO2 emissions reduction is up to the order of 37 lakh ton per year by 2030 as an outcome of all these studies. As just an example, in the urban mobility space, we did a small pilot study for the conversion of the micro market or the IPT in Gurugram, where we are based. So we just exemplified that if these ugly and unsustainable modes of transport are actually converted into a more comfortable and green electric autos, it 47,000 tons per year of CO2 emissions can be saved annually. In the factor of renewable energy, So this is the nodal agency for planning and tendering and bid processing and implementation of RE projects on behalf of Indian Railways. So we have been given a target of implementation of 3 gigawatt capacity of renewable energy, which comprises ground-mounted solar project over vacant land parcels and along tracks of Indian Railways by 2030. Already we have commissioned rooftop solar plant, about 248 megawatt rooftop solar plants, ground-mounted solar projects about 54 megawatts, wind projects of about 103 megawatts, and these are just the small beginnings because this is the implementation has just begun since the past 2 years. So as we can see, this has already resulted in significant savings. The rooftop solar plant, about 3.84 lakh tons of CO2 per annum, ground-mounted 0.84 lakh tons of CO2, and wind projects savings of about 1.60 lakh tons of CO2 per annum are achieved. In terms of the water transport, we are actively pursuing studies of inland navigation and port development, which are promoting the use of more energy efficient inland water transport as well as for the EXIM traffic. So and another area is the ropeway projects, so which are again increasingly being seen as an sustainable and eco-friendly mode of transport even in urban areas, because these are low cost, low energy form of transport which are particularly useful in hilly areas and even urban areas with rolling terrains. So as an example, we have done the Shillong ropeway, in which the road distance of 13 kilometers and travel time of 2 hours was reduced to 1 kilometer travel distance and time of only 3 minutes. So we are replacing the 200 vehicles per day, which translates up to 250 tons of CO2 emission savings per year. In Dharamshala ropeway, it was a 9-kilometer distance was reduced to 2 kilometers by ropeway, and travel time of 1 hour was to 5 minutes. So besides the savings in travel time and the costs for the passengers, it definitely aids in the CO2 reductions, 2,300 tons per year. So just summing up that the way the transport sector can contribute to the mitigation of the climate change and meeting the target of net zero by 2070, we believe gradual transition to decarbonization of transport sector can aid in definitely in that. Electric power source for transportation should also be increasingly shifted to green fuels. Right now, electric, it's a debatable topic that the electric itself, sources itself, they are all not sustainable. As a beginning, all public transport should be transitioned to renewable energy, preferably by 2030. I think that is also one of the stated goals of the government. And accelerated shift into green hydrogen as an alternate source of fuel, this we feel should be accelerated. We need to have more focus on localized research and development, public education and awareness, and incentivizing the use of sustainable transport is an area. Like when we see more focus on localized research and development, one example is even solar panels are not considered sustainable in the long run. So there is, as we see in various countries now, we are talking about organically grown solar panels, which are biodegradable and which are increasingly being made more energy efficient, and they are cheaper. So such kind of localized research, and then shifting to the hydrogen fuel cell, which should be the holy grail of solving the clean energy requirement. So that has to be accelerated in the industry as well as in the government circles. So I think that we would like to just sum up here, and the floor is to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Negi. And it's really very nice to hear this and to hear about all your initiatives and how you're integrating that with the development projects. Any question for Mr. Negi? Yes. So Mr. Negi, we will collect a few questions for you, and you answer them all together. So let's take a few. Yes.
Hi, sir. Thank you for your presentation. I am a researcher. I'm a researcher and I mainly study the inland navigation, inland water transport in India. And because I study that, I've read through most of the DPRs prepared by RITES. And in your presentation, you mentioned that you specifically pay attention to the EIA that is done. But I would like to point out that many of the DPRs do not have the EIA component in them. And also, when we talk about water transports, specifically the riverine inland transport, the fact that although it may be leads to some emission curtailment on the carbon emissions point of view, but it also leads to a lot of interventions in the rivers which are not reflected well, at least in the DPRs. So I would like to hear more from you on that.
Yes.
I would like to add in this
Just one moment. There are a couple of more questions. So we'll collect all the questions for you and you can answer them together.
Good evening. My name is Nivedita. I'm from IANS. My question is, for the last slide, it mentioned about green hydrogen. How soon are we expecting it to be integrated into the larger scheme of things, vis-a-vis availability of technology?
I'm Sudha from the Times of India, Cochin. Now, just like how the metro trains are running on solar energy, are we looking, or can we be hopeful that soon we'll have some of these railways, trains powered by solar energy, rooftop coaches having rooftop solar panels or anything like that?
Any more? Right. Go ahead. Yes, Mr. Negi and Mr. Harinag.
Actually, our management recently decided that every DPR should have a EA component. Earlier in our DPRs, EA component is not part of the some of the DPRs. Only for the clearances projects only we are doing the EA studies, and for the funding agency projects only. Now we have made a clear mandate from our management that every DPR should have a chapter and special study on that EA studies. So in future, if you find any DPR from RITES, then you will get a chapter on the EA study, definitely. This is regarding the inland waterways. And regarding green hydrogen
I would also like to add that the question that the ma'am had in mind was that definitely the inland water transport is a lower consumer of energy for the propulsion for the moment, but the pollutants that are released not only in the air but in the water bodies that are a source of concern for the marine ecosystems. That is a global phenomenon, and what we want to say is that when we are talking about shifting of all public transport, all these things to electric and to more greener fuels, so that problem will automatically get addressed. So for the time being, yes, we have this thing, but even in the organic fuels that are being, we are gradually seeing for the private vehicles, gradually we are seeing more stringent norms being introduced for these hydrocarbon fuels. But when we shift to electric and the other cleaner fuels, this problem will be addressed. Regarding the green hydrogen, that is still being tackled like various platforms across India and the world. Recently, Tata has released a prototype of the green hydrogen bus, but it is still in the trial stage, and we have to wait at least a few years. Till that time, we have electric things which by 2030 should take care of this. And we also even in the renewable, if you see in the space, the CNG buses actually have a CNG as a mode of green source of fuel was taken very kindly, but then the availability all over India has not been so far. It has not penetrated all over India in the same thing. But electric is coming, and then we also have there is an innovation going on in the industry that just as we have a CNG kit which can be mounted onto a petrol engine, so instead of a fully electric car, electric conversion kits for the petrol and diesel vehicles are also being come, like the way you carry a separate CNG cylinder, which is an add-on. The same way, the companies are actually working on models in which you can carry a spare battery, and then it's a converter kit which you have a petrol tank as well as the electric converter kit. And this actually is a sort of a transitory phase till we reach full electrification. Regarding the ma'am's question on the solar use of solar panels for Kochi Metro is the front runner. We appreciate that and introducing this thing. And even in railways, as we showed in one of the slides, we already are introducing rooftop solar panels on the top of railway station buildings, the platform sheds, and it is being under trial phase in certain trains. But as you said, because trains need constant source of energy, so being solely dependent on rooftop mounted solar panels and the energy efficiency so far is not to that level which the train's solar panels can actually drive the train. But a mix of hybrid systems and the way energy efficiencies of the solar panels are being developed, but definitely these will, as the efficiencies improve and as the incremental capacities of these the solar powered and the wind power energy gets into it, we'll see increasing use of that. But right now, they cannot be the sole source of attraction for the. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Yes, there's one question at the back. There's one. So, Mr. Negi, a lot of questions. Certainly that stirred a lot of interest. Yes, sir. Yes.
Hi, Aisha Datta from ET Prime. I just wanted to ask a corollary question to the one on the DPRs, the EIAs. As you mentioned that once your inland waterways, the transport modes are electrified, there will be less pollutants and discharge. But that's not the only concern with inland waterways transportation. There's also a concern of biodiversity in terms of the interaction with biodiversity. For example, in Ganga, one of the areas where inland waterways are being concerned, are being pushed for, it holds protected species like the Gangetic dolphins. Are your EIAs also taking into account the impact of interaction with the wildlife and not just pollutants?
Yeah, definitely. It should be like that only. We need to study that aquatic life also while doing the inland waterways. Actually, at present, we have not done any EIA study for this inland waterways. Definitely, it will be, if we are doing the EIA study for on Ganga River or Brahmaputra, then it should be the aquatic aquatic ecosystem also need to be considered.
Right. Any more? No, I think we have asked all the questions, Mr. Negi, but thanks so much. And so what you said, that really kind of resonated. And so we're really looking forward to knowing more about your programs and projects. But one clear hope that we have is that all the development projects in the city, because city is the focus of the conversation today, we certainly hope that India will finally adopt a more detailed traffic impact assessment as part of the EIA. That we should not just as part of the project area assessment, but take a radius around the project area and do a proper traffic impact assessment in urban centers and provide the right mitigation that is needed. So that will be a really something that we will really like to look forward to. So thank you very much. This was very, very helpful. Yes, Mr. Negi, was saying something?
I think, yes, when you say about traffic impact assessment, so all the studies that we do, this has been mandated by Minister of Housing and Urban Affairs. So alternative analysis of transport modes that we suggest, we always have to do that. And the most appropriate system which addresses the mobility needs and the structure of the, when we are doing the mass transit system, definitely, as you mentioned also, So TOD is being increasingly taken as a measure of development to optimize the travel mobility itself. The need to travel, the trip length should be reduced. That structure itself is there, and then the more and more use of walkability and the non-motorized modes of transport and the streetscape design itself. That all is part of the comprehensive transport studies that we do. So that is being taken care of and aided by the Government of India itself.
Oh, that's very nice to know. Thank you very much, Mr. Negi and Mr. Negi and Mr. Harinath. Thank you being with us. Big hand to them.
Thank you.
So now we move on to the next part of the session, and that's going to look at the circular economy and two very exciting themes. One, plastic, the most emotive issue today, and the other, what do you do with the dump site in your cities? So let me first, the fascinating stories you will find that. Let me first invite Siddharth. Yes, Siddharth. So Siddharth, Deputy Program Manager, Solid Waste Management Program in CSC.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Today I'll be talking about plastics. We all know that plastics are a very inherent part of our lives right now, right? And at the moment we see plastic, we can totally relate that, okay, there's some kind of human civilization around. So 2021 and 2022, these 2 years have been very eventful as far as the policy aspect of plastics is concerned, right? So today we will be discussing, we'll be touch basing on 4 different aspects. One is what kind of data do we have around plastics currently in the public domain. The second one is about what actually do we mean when we say that plastics can be recycled. The third one is around the single-use plastic ban, which I'm sure all of you might be aware of. And the last one is the latest extended producer responsibility policy that has been introduced as latest as January 2022. So talking about data on generation, there's only one study that we have. It's conducted by the Central Pollution Control Board. The study was conducted in the year 2012. The methodology was basically CPCB sent out people to 60 different cities in India, where they kind of, at the dump site, they characterized the waste and they kind of quantified the amount of plastic that was coming out of these dump sites. This data was then extrapolated from these 60 cities, and we arrived at a figure which is 9.5 million tons. Now, this study was done, the groundwork was done in 2012. This study was released in 2015. And the figure we got was 9.5 million metric tons. Now when we jump to 2018-19, there's an annual report that CPCB puts out every year. So in 2018-19 and also in the 2019-20 report that CPCB, annual report that CPCB has put out, the plastic waste generation has gone down to 3.3 million metric tons. That's a decline of over 60%. And this has been achieved in the time when e-commerce was booming in the country, right? So this is something that is very important to note at this point in time. The next part is around the data on recycling. So there's no data on recycling as per CPCB, but there's data as per the industry estimates. So there are industry associations who put out estimates, who put out numbers. We'll be having a look at those. And then we also will talk about how much of plastic do we claim that we recycle. So the numbers are here. We claim that we are recycling, as a country, we recycle 60% of our plastic waste, while the global recycling rate for plastics is just 9%. right? So I have my director here. He says that if that's what is happening in India, then India has to be a country from the future, right? So just to reiterate what I shared, these are the reports. The name of the report on the leftmost column, the year of publication, and then how we have come down from 9.5 to the most latest figure that we have, that's 3.5 million metric tons. Now, if we talk about where do we send once we discard our plastic, where does it go, right? So this is a analysis or maybe a comparison of two different reports that the same industry association has put out for the year 2018 and for the year 2019. If you look at the first row, the number of organized recycling units have gone down by 97%. And in the same period, the number of unorganized recycling units for plastic have gone up by 60%. Direct manpower in formalized sector has gone down by 83%. And in the informal sector has increased by 50%, while we just managed to increase our recycling capacity by a mere 8.3%. Now, when we say that, okay, every kind of plastic can be recycled, I'm very sure that you might have heard this narrative that all plastics are recyclable, right? But when we say recycling, there are different types of recycling that can happen to a kind of plastic, and it depends on what kind of plastic are we talking about. So CPCB, or rather, this is a globally accepted kind of categorization for recycling, plastic recycling. When I say primary recycling, it means that it's bottle to bottle. So basically, I throw away a bottle, I recycle it, and I make a bottle again out of it, right? That's what primary recycling means. And it also means that the recycled product can again be used for the same application, right? The second one is secondary recycling, which means that I am taking bottles and then I am processing it and making maybe a textile fiber or something else out of it, maybe a chair or maybe a bucket, right? The third one, tertiary, is I am melting the plastic and converting it to a different kind of fuel, which I can burn in different kind of facilities. The last one is simply burning the plastic to kind of take out the embedded energy that we have in the plastic, right? Now, in India, what we have is a lot of secondary recycling. Primary recycling is almost non-existent. We have a lot of secondary recycling. I think the numbers are between 85 to 90%. And we are seeing an increasing trend that is moving towards tertiary recycling, because it is seen as the easier option to just transport your waste from point A to point B where it can be burnt. Now, while I also shared that we say that, we are processing or we are recycling around 60% of our plastic, we also have a lot of plastic in our dump sites. Dump sites is a topic that my colleague, Dr. Richa, will talk about. But plastics in our dump sites are a huge problem. They are a problem when we are mining, they are a problem when we are storing, they are a problem when we are transporting it. But what actually, again, there's only one study. This again brings us back to the 2015 study that CPCB did. What they found was 94% of the plastic that was found in the dump sites, these 60 dump sites, was recyclable in nature. But the question then is, why was it lying there, right? If it was recyclable, if it had value, and if it is economically viable, why was it lying at the dump sites and why not at a recycling center in the country? Now that's again, if you look at the table on your right, it says different kinds of plastic. Now, I'm sure when you hold a plastic, it has 3 chasing arrows, which indicates that it is recyclable, and then it has a number, right? A lot of people feel that the number indicates the number of times the plastic can be recycled, but that's not the case. The number on the plastic indicates the type of plastic that it is, right? And then what we found, or what CPCB found, was that of this 94%, 67% was high density polyethylene or low density polyethylene, both of which are recyclable, but were still found at these dump sites. And also another problem is about the multi-layer packaging, the gutka pouches, and the mixed plastic, which easily gets contaminated with, let's say, food waste or any other kind of material. Now there's, like I was sharing, that we've always been told that, it's okay to use plastic because at the end of the day, it is going to get recycled. But then this is an agenda that the plastic industry in India is pushing. They want you to believe that everything can be recycled, but the truth is far from that. And it already has been established that globally, we are only able to recycle 9% of our plastic. Also, the Indian plastic industry has a lot of influence on the policies that we are making, at a national level. So we also need to understand and demystify the politics of plastic recycling. Now, in the year 2021, we came out with a single-use plastic ban. CSE did a report in 2020 where it said that now it's time to kind of define single-use plastic. The good part about the notification is now we have a definition. As a country, we have defined single-use plastic as a plastic commodity intended to be used once for the same purpose before being disposed of or recycled. So this is the definition that we have. What the notification says is that we have listed 20 different single-use plastic items for phase out. The phase out date is 1st of July 2022. And how did we arrive at these 20 figures is by conducting a study where the utility index of the product was compared with the environmental impact of the product. So for a product to be eligible for phase out, the utility index has to be low and the environmental impact has to be high, right? Now what was interesting is that for small plastic bottles or a handful of single-use plastic products, they did meet this requirement of a low utility index and a high environmental impact, but they were still left out of this phase out schedule. They were not considered. We'll just see that in the next slide. And then also what is notable is that now the plastic bags that we manufacture will be a minimum thickness of 120 microns. So this is the data that I'm talking about. On the right, you see what is supposed to be phased out. So utility index is listed and also the environmental impact. But I just want you to focus on one thing. You can look at these two examples. The utility index for both these single-use plastic items is very less, and the environmental impact is very high. But still, we have left these plastic products and we have not considered them for phase out. Now, about carry bags, we all know they are a problem. We see them everywhere, right? And what the notification, the SUP notification basically says that now we move from a thickness of 50 microns to 120 microns. The motive behind doing this is that maybe a thicker plastic will have a higher value. It will get collected and then it will get channelized to a recycling system, right? We yet have to find out if that happens. Now, the next big thing that has come out in this year, in 2022, is the extended producer responsibility. So it is a tool. Basically, EPR, or extended producer responsibility, is a policy mechanism or a policy tool through which we hold producers of plastic products responsible for the products that they are putting out in the market. So basically, it promotes the polluter pay principle, and then we are saying you've put this out in the market, it's your responsibility to collect it back and then do the rest of it. So every company, all the producers, importers, and brand owners have been assigned targets for collection, for recycling, for the use of recycled recycled plastic in their product, right? However, there are a few problems. The first one is that we do not know the number of producers, importers, or brand owners we have in the country. We don't have an inventory of how many entities are putting out plastic products in the market. We don't know the quantum of the plastic that is put out by these entities in the Indian market, it is currently based on self-declaration, right? So if I am a company and I say that I have put out this much of plastic, there's no other way but to believe what I'm saying, right? Now CPCB is in the process of developing a portal, but again, this data will never come out in the public domain. It stays on the CPCB portal, and only a handful of people from CPCB, SPCB, recyclers and processors can actually have access to that data. So it will never become public as far as the situation right now is. Now the next challenge is collection targets have been given from the year 21-22, which means this year also brands are supposed to collect back plastic, but recycling targets have been assigned from the year 24-25, which means that in this period we do not know what happens to the plastic waste that these brands or PBOs are collecting back, right? These are some challenges. Now, just for your reference, these are the collection targets. So the notification has basically divided or categorized plastic into rigid, flexible, multi-layer, and compostable. And then these are the targets for collection. So in 21-22, we do 25%, reaching to 100% in 23-24. Recycling targets for rigid start at 50%, for flexible 30, multi-layer 30, compostable 50. They go up to these. So this is the maximum that we have to achieve. So even in the year 2030, we don't have to recycle more than 80% of the rigid plastic waste. And we don't have to, and so it's applicable for multi-layer and flexible plastic. Use of recycled content. So this is the amount of plastic that I will have in a product. So let's say let's say this is made out of plastic. So instead of being made out of 100% virgin plastic, in the year 25, this will have 30% of rigid plastic in it. The problem here is we don't have any technology to corroborate any claim that the brand owners make, right? So that's the problem there. And then even in the year 27-28, we still be channelizing a lot of our plastic waste to waste to energy plants or for co-incineration. So that's the problem. Now multi-layers plastic is an agenda that has been in the limelight for as long as, if I'm not mistaken, 22 years. Right? So right from 1999, India as a country, the policymakers have been trying to phase out or ban multi-layer plastic, but this agenda has escaped the policymakers time and again. A classic example of this is, if you look at what the plastic waste management rules 2016 said, that all the non-recyclable plastic has to be phased out by 2018. In 2018, there was an amendment which said that all the plastic which is non-recyclable or non-energy recoverable, so just these terms were added, non-energy recoverable or with no alternate use, should be phased out in 2 years' time. Now, every plastic is energy recoverable. Any material in the world is energy recoverable. If you burn it, you'll get the embedded energy out of it, right? So while we say that a lot of plastics are recyclable, even multi-layer plastic are recyclable, that is not the case. The economy of scale fails when we talk about low value plastics and we are talking about recycling. So that's my bit today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you so much.
So let me suggest one thing. Can we, because we are looking at two sides of the waste, so should we first have all the presentations, just another presentation, and then let's have a free flow discussion. So may I invite Richa Singh, Program Officer. Yes, you are going to tell us about the dump site, and keeping in mind that this time in COP26, the methane pledge, it caught the imagination of the world. And that also means that it drew a lot of attention. The waste is now drawn that, the global attention that it requires. So that linkage will be absolutely critical to understand what the local linkage would like to understand.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Richa Singh, and in this presentation, we will be talking about dump site remediation with a special focus on how it links with the climate change. So this is the current status. I would like to start with the current status of dump site in the country. But before that, I'd like to brief you about the regulatory framework. And as we all are aware, the Solid Waste Management Regulation of 2016, it actually ranks the waste management strategies, and it has defined the waste hierarchy system in the integrated solid waste management system, where more emphasis has been given to waste strategies such as prevention, reduction of the waste at the source itself, followed by reuse, recycling, and recovery. So these strategies are considered as the most preferred technologies based on the energy requirement and also on the kind of environmental impact they're making on the environment. And the least preferred option should be landfilling or the land disposal. However, if we see the present scenario, unfortunately, most of the ULBs across the country are following land disposal, not by sanitary landfilling or scientific landfilling, but by dumping of the waste indiscriminately or haphazardly in just a piece of land. So if you can see, there are reportedly 3,159 dump sites, estimated operational dump sites estimated by the Central Pollution Control Board. And these are, of course, an offshoot of waste mismanagement over the decades. And out of this 3,159 dump site, the state with the highest numbers is Uttar Pradesh, which has 609 dump sites, followed by we have Madhya Pradesh with 385 or 87 dump sites. Then we have this Maharashtra with 318 dump sites and Karnataka with 215 dump sites. So basically, this is a ubiquitous thing. Wherever you go, you will find a dump site, which has to be remediated as soon as possible. So if we talk about the land footprint, nearly 10,000 to 15,000 hectares of land is currently occupied by the legacy waste. And just to visualize it, it is equivalent to nearly 14,300 football grounds. Sorry? I'm so sorry, I just can't hear the... So 21,000 if you consider 15,000 hectares of land, and 14,300 if you consider 10,000 hectares of land. So that's my bad, I would have written a range over here. Anyway, so if you talk about the legacy waste quantification, we have nearly 1,300 million tons of legacy waste, which is currently lying in our dump sites. And the estimated cost for remediation, considering that 800 rupees per ton is the cost of remediating the legacy waste, is 1,04,000 crore rupees. It's a huge number, and it's 74% of the total budget outlay given allocated by the Swachh Bharat Mission 2.0. And so these are the major dump sites in the country, where the first one is the Devnar, which is the largest and the oldest dump site in the country, having which is spread over a land of 326 acres, having an average height of 37 meters, and the total volume of the waste as 120 lakh tons of legacy waste. Now, this is known for all the negative reasons, because we have been listening and reading about the frequent cases of landfill fires, subsurface fires, as well as surface fires in Devnar, which deteriorates the air quality. We also have our very own Ghazipur dump site, which is spread over an area of 70 acres, having an average height of 65 meters, and total volume of waste to be remediated as 140 lakh tons. Now, these all are the estimated values, and it can be even more than that. In most of the cases, the estimated values are always underestimated, and that is one of the challenges with the biomining operation, which we will discuss in the later slides. We also have this Kodangayur. So this is a recent one, which I have taken from the, it's an annual report by, so I think, yes. It's in Mumbai, and Kodangayur is in Chennai. So Devnar is operational since 1921. It's world's second largest and India's largest dump site. If we talk about the GHG emission, because that is the agenda today, so we have this, as you can see in this picture. Ma'am, can I go there and make them understand?
Take a mic.
So, no, I can just, so the problem is with mixed waste. So what happens if we are talking about mixed waste, it's a mix of biodegradable organics as well as non-biodegradable organics. So when this is collected and disposed of into the landfill, now I'm not going into details like how the formal system work and the informal system works. So the commingled waste or a mixed waste, which is unsegregated form, it goes to the landfill. Your landfill will start acting as an ecosystem where there is exchanges and interactions taking place between the biotic and the abiotic factors. And there will be several biochemical reactions that will take place. And we, in scientific terminology, we call it acetogenesis, and methanogenesis. As a result of methanogenesis, the methane gas will be produced, and which is something that has to be controlled. And this is happening, why? Because we are disposing of the organic biodegradables. Now in this process, this is something which is not limited to greenhouse gases emissions only. We also get leachate, which is nothing but the foul black color liquid, which is contaminated with several heavy metals as well as organic contaminants such as halogenated hydrocarbons. Now the problem is from this dump site, because this is not constructed, operated and designed in a scientific manner, there is no liner system in this dump site. All this leachate will finally trickle down to the groundwater and contaminate it. The same thing happens with the surface water also. Because of the runoff and in precipitation, the runoff will ultimately contaminate the surface. The problem with the Indian dump sites is they are not constructed based on the regulatory framework. There is no site selection criteria. There is no investigative study before a site is considered for, considered for a dump site or a landfill, which has to be done. When we are talking about a. Yeah, is it? There is some noise. I'm so sorry for the glitch. So, how do I do that? So, and the other problems which are associated with is the presence of bioaerosols, the presence of PM 2.5 and PM 10. It causes a lot of other problem, and it has several environmental and socio-economic health hazards. Now, the thing which I wanted to tell in the previous slide, maybe in this slide, this 74% is a huge number. That means the dumping of waste haphazardly is not only limited to environmental and socio-economic implication, but has major economic implications as well. So this is a lesson and a warning for us that in future, we are not going to do this. We are not going to create future garbage mountains. And now the government is also, it has mandated that the cities having more than 10 lakh population, they are required to remediate the dump site before 31st March 2024. And the cities having a population less than 10 lakh, they are required to remediate their sites before 31st March 2023. So how can we remediate the sites? So basically, there are two major methods which are applied. The third one is a combination of the first two. In the first case, we have this biomining of dump site. So biomining by bioremediation is nothing. It's a simple scientific method where the legacy waste is excavated by scientific method, and then it is stabilized by using some kind of bioinoculums. And after that, it is segregated into different fractions. And the the major fraction being the soil-like material, and other fractions are RDF, scrap polymeric and combustible material. And we also get some hazardous material also, which we will discuss in the later slide. The other method is, so in this process, the entire waste is treated, legacy waste is treated. The land is reclaimed land. Now, this is something which is very important because the land which is already buried or occupied with the legacy waste is reclaimed in this process. And the fractions, various fractions that are that we get, they are used for various gainful applications. On the contrary, we also have this biocapping technology where there is mechanism to collect and treat the leachate as well as the landfill gas. But in this process, land is not recovered. We just cover it in an engineered way, and no waste fractions are utilized in this process. So basically, it's not a sustainable way. And India has witnessed several failures. The one in Gorei dump site in Mumbai is one of the classic examples, where they claim that they will cap the dump site, they will extract the methane, and they will capture or maybe they will earn some carbon credits by capturing those methane emissions. But unfortunately, they had to return those money that they earn from carbon emissions by earning those, because the design failed and there was leakage of methane gas. It was not captured properly. So that is why we do not recommend, or even the government NGT is not recommending biocapping as a potential solution for remediation of the dump site. The third option is a hybrid model, which is mostly practiced by almost all the ULBs, because here a fraction of waste is treated, a fraction of land is reclaimed, and if they are not able to utilize all the fraction of the waste, they are just putting it in a sanitary landfill and capping it. So it's a combination of both biomining as well as biocapping. So if you look at the composition of legacy waste, it's very different from fresh municipal solid waste, because typically Indian dump sites contain a mix of legacy waste as well as fresh waste, municipal solid waste. And the composition differs from one strata to another strata. If you go down, you will find more soil-like material or decomposed and partially decomposed organic matter. And at the surface, you will find more organic content because the fresh waste has been dumped over the surface. Okay, so if you can see, the significant proportion is the fine soil-like material, which ranges between 50 to 60%. Then we have coarser particles such as broken bricks, stones, etc., which ranges from 20 to 25%. The combustible material ranges from 15 to 18% on weight basis. And there are other miscellaneous items such as sanitary waste as well as the domestic hazardous waste, such as metallic fractions, such as razors, needles, batteries, diapers. It contributes to around 1 to 2%. Now, this is a tentative composition. It varies because legacy waste dump sites represents a very heterogeneous mix of all the components of the waste. So it will differ from one dump site to another dump site, but this is more or less, this is the range that we have observed in the Indian context. So what happens to the reclaimed material where it can be used? Now, this is very, very important, that the fractions that we are extracting after treating the legacy waste by bioremediation method is a fine soil-like material. What could be the tentative quantities? This I have written on the basis of the fact that the total quantity of legacy waste treated is 1,300 million tons, out of which 780 tons would be the fine soil-like material. Now, this material, what could be the potential applications? It can be used as earth filling material, the filling of the low-lying areas, for road making, as a substitute of clay in construction industry. This is something that has not been done. Like they have used it as a earth filling material, but not as a substitute of clay or sand for various construction purpose, because it might contain traces of organics, which will interfere in the hydration reaction, which happens when it reacts with the cement. So coarser inert materials, it can be used again for filling of the low-lying areas. It can also be used as aggregates in C&D waste processing industry. Yes, just 2-3 minutes more. And the scrap polymeric combustible material, the material having considerable calorific value. This again can be used as a refuse-derived fuel and also in road making. Now, the important point what I'm going to make here is the fact that there are so many environmental and health hazards associated with utilization of these materials. Not very easy as it is looking in this table, but you have to test certain the presence of pollutants, especially the heavy metals and the leachable heavy metals in these fractions, and then only it can be. So this is one of the policy recommendation from our side. Like if we do not have exhaustive guidelines or any government document which can actually guide us to tell that, okay, if this is the material which has been generated as a mine fraction, these are the tests or these are the standards it should pass to be used as for various gainful applications. So along with that, there are other challenges also, like operational, infrastructural, and financial. One of the major challenge is the sale of the recycled material, which is not only limited to legacy waste management, but also it stands true for the fresh waste also. We need to have more incentives, and we need to have more end user of those RDF, which is extracted from the legacy waste sites. And also the transportation cost should be borne by both the users, I mean the industry which is buying that material, and also the ULB which is extracting that material. This is one of the case studies in Indore. I'll go quickly. So there is the dump site covering an area of 100 acres. So that dump site has now been converted into city forest, and it is known as Dev Guradia City Forest, which is acting as a carbon sequestration park. And there is no greenhouse gas emission from that site now. And the total amount of quantity of the legacy waste that they have treated is 15 lakh metric ton. They have recovered everything, and they have sold the RDF to the cement plant, nearest cement plants. The fine fraction has been used for used in the filling up of the low-lying areas, and the leftover waste, which was 15%, was sent to the secure landfills. So this is an interesting slide, ma'am. I'll just take 1 minute and finish it up. So it's the revenue from carbon credits. So Indore is a city which is not only which has not only remediated the dump site in an efficient way, but this is something which has diverted 550 tons of waste from landfill to a treatment plant or bio-CNG plant. And from there, it is earning nearly 35 crore rupees per annum, which is commendable just by saving the carbon emission. And also from generating CNG, it is earning 34.75 crore of rupees, considering that the price of 1 kg of CNG is 56 rupees. So the roadmap for a zero landfill city that we all are dreaming for, it should be based on the fact that minimum amount of waste is going to landfills. There should not be any kind of dump site, no more dump sites in our country. There should be negligible amount, 100% waste processing and treatment, and minimum or negligible amount of rejects and inert should ideally go to the landfills. There should be ban on landfilling of wet waste. That's very, very important. And it's not a rocket science to treat a wet waste. The only thing we have to do is segregate it at the source. We have to make efforts to segregate it at the source and treat it, divert it to the right place. And scientific landfill to be used only for negligible amount, which is 10 to 15%. And there shouldn't be fresh waste. Fresh waste in any case should not be taken to the dump sites. So with this, I'll close this presentation. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Siddharth, why don't you come here as well, both you and Richa? So yes, very quick round of questions. So we take the, is it working? Or you can take this. I think it's working. So here, then Joyanto.
My question is to Siddharth. Most of the figures you have quoted about the volume of plastic waste and its a grade, and everything is based on Central Pollution Control Board figures. No other figures are available, and I have serious doubts about integrity of regulatory bodies in this country, especially Pollution Control Board. I have seen it in states, they are thoroughly corrupt, and the tools in the hands of ruling forces, they are misused so thoroughly. So I would not find their figures very trustworthy. That is one thing. But you had your own problems that those are probably the only figures available to you. Second thing, it has no mention of individual garbage collectors, rag pickers, who are in millions and who do a tremendous work. And the first level of garbage segregation in this country, especially the plastic waste, is done by these individuals who are not recognized by any forces. So what they collect probably is never accounted. Probably there is no recognition of the amount of plastic waste which they collect. That is one. Other figures from your presentation are from Plastic Manufacturers Association, are units what they declare. As all of us know, our industries are known to be tax stealers. They do not believe in declaring their production. So their voluntary declaration, how much they had produced, is of very little value to me in terms of trustworthiness. I would not believe that they are declaring that. Plastic recycling units are unauthorized in most of the areas. They are not even registered industries. In residential areas, those units are operating. So that is also very, very foggy picture. So the whole presentation, though it is very good, it is good analysis based on the available figures, but there is no trustworthiness of available figures. So you ever thought of this problem that you are building your entire analysis based on figures which are probably not trustworthy? Nobody would consider them trustworthy.
Okay, thank you.
Wait, so let's gather all the questions, because he has actually raised the most fundamental question about environment and management in this country. So this is only, yes, thank you, and then Jayanto.
Yeah, so I have two questions. One for Siddharth, and ma'am, maybe if you can also pitch in. And I just want to pick your brain on the aspect of mixing fly ash and plastic with cement. So during the presentations, we have seen that it's been recommended that fly ash be mixed with cement so that it can be used somewhere, because we have a lot of legacy fly ash. And also in one of the slides, you talked about how plastic can also be sent for incineration, and then it can be mixed with cement. So cement, because it's the backbone, the main construction material, which is going to be there in most of the built infrastructure, then how are we looking at the problem of heat that you talked about? Do you think like any sort of, like what sort of suggestions, or how would you think about it is what I want to know about. And the other question is for Dr. Richa. It was a amazingly informative and insightful session, and I really admired the way you talked about numbers there and how on point you were. I want to ask about if you know what is the estimate of the landfills which have crossed their lifespan. I know about Okla that it expired, I think, in 2006. Ghazipur has also expired, I think. It's overrunning its lifespan. All right. And what is maybe the estimate of landfills which are lined, as you talked about, sanitary 65%? Thank you so much. No, it helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Jayanto Basu from Telegraph. First, I second my colleague's opinion that rag pickers do play a very important role in the waste management in cities across India. And often elsewhere in the world, they are being considered or called climate volunteers, but they do not kind of being recognized the way they should have been in the waste management structure, formal waste management structure in the country. That's, I think, a very important point being raised. But I have two questions, one for each of you. When many of us started journalism, I think not much back, even in 2010, 2011, the standard of plastic was 20 micron. In 2011, it became 40. In 2016, if I'm not wrong, it went to 50. You mentioned 125, but in between there is another that is 75 in 2021.
Yes.
So 20 to 125 within a decade. But on the implementation, it's zero. You go to any city, barring few so-called case studies, it's zero. My point is, what drives the government to raise the standard when they themselves know they have nothing doing on the ground? It virtually a completely, I would say, hilarious mode of implementation. It should be seen as a case study across the world. How poorly you can implement a norm. In 2011, it was 20. 2022, it will be 125, but virtually on ground, you are still having 20 or even less than that. So that's my question to you. What's the point in developing new standards? Is there any hidden driver behind it? I really don't know. That's the first question. One for Dr. Richa Singh. You mentioned about the legacy waste. Now, this whole legacy waste is now being driven by the NGT. NGT has been across the cities are being giving orders on this legacy waste. You mentioned that about 1 lakh crore had to be there. Now, I was looking at some data in West Bengal about the various legacy waste dumps, and old dumps virtually have no contamination potential. So when our solid waste management budget is that meager, when on ground we don't have any scientific landfills across the country, barring few cities, what drives us working? Is that the priority? Should that be a priority? Is government or some officials are kind of manufacturing a method to earn money out of it? What's the point in spending 1 lakh crore when you know that's not really contaminating enough? Please.
One more question. I think given an ultimatum that we have to close.
Yeah, both of presentation are very good, useful, and we can implement it in our city through follow on administrative level or one thing I want to add to you, Ms. Richa. It's my experience. There is a golden triangle in Maharashtra is Bombay, Pune, Nasik. Okay, all distance is 180 kilometers. If you travel to Nasik to Mumbai, Nasik to Pune, or Pune to Mumbai, you will find that there is a lot of cities. The population is around 1,50,000 or 50,000 or 100, but the lifestyle of all these cities are just like a corporate cities. So you will find all the highways are dumping grounds. It very bad scene was there. A lot of plastics, garbage are collected and drop it on the highways. So this kind of issue is very severe issue in future. We are planning, and we're discussing about 1 million population city, but the issue is 50,000 population cities more severe. So we should include it in our presentation, and we should take it as a policy to follow. Thank you.
I have a suggestion. If this research, kindly include smaller cities, because there these rules are thoroughly compromised. I mean, this is a money minting thing as far as solid waste management. Each year, this is given to different people, whosoever. I think they must be bribing, because no work has been done, and they just misutilize the money. So this is.
Yeah. I think this session will last us as long as you want.
I have two small questions. I have two small questions. Is there any study about landfill sites? Is there any study about landfill sites having certain kind of impacts on population living around that area?
So, sir, to answer your question first, I'll then come to you, sir.
One second, we are just closing it, just one more minute. So let's just finish that, and then you can answer all the questions together.
The question is basically about the health issues. That I think the same question also. My issue is, I want to raise the issue that when you're thinking of segregation of waste based on biodegradable and non-biodegradable thing, when without solving that, how you are going to solve this land filling issue. Because most of the, what is being managed is that they are taking both combination there. When you can't start from your house itself, collection points itself, and how you're going to solve this major issue. Yeah.
They still have two different kind of Dabbar. One is blue and one is green for different things. But the hooper which comes to take that thing, it's just one. Just one.
And okay. And this one. The last. This is the last question. We know that poorest of poor people are living in the nearby dump sites, and all the workers are poorest of poor. Is there any study or data about the quantum of health issues being faced by these people? First. Second thing is this is an unconnected issue, but I don't think there is not any separate section. Is there any data about how much e-waste, electronic waste is being produced by country? I haven't found any data anywhere.
They used to have this ritualistic process of sending out their data to
Yeah, it's
So both of you can just collectively answer all the questions.
Yeah. So, sir, thank you for the question. I think it's a very eye-opening question, and the answer is going to be equally eye-opening. We have more than 100 of publications, studies done by premier institutes like IITs, where they have identified the groundwater pollution, where they have also identified, and fire is something that we are like seeing every day. We are not seeing how much carbon emission, we are not quantifying that. We are also not quantifying that how much SOx, NOx, and other obnoxious gases are also produced in the entire process. So it's very easy to say that nothing is happening, it's already inert. But just imagine a 30, 40, 50-year-old dump site. That time hame pata bhi nahi tha what we are dumping in it. Is it like hazardous waste, e-waste, sanitary waste? What all combinations are there? So we can't say that is inert in nature, or that is not something which is creating irreversible environmental damage. So I'm very glad that the government of India has recognized this problem, and we are solving this problem, because this is just a bomb. We don't know what is going to happen 10 years down the line. And if you see the present scenario also, I'll share those papers with you. There is heavy metal pollution, there is organic contaminant pollution, the groundwater, the surface water, everything is polluted. And it has been documented by international journals. Unfortunately, those inputs are not taken up by the policymakers, and that's why we feel that nothing is happening. Until and unless we read them and we understand them, we just can't make any comment on that. So I think when we say something is inert and it is not causing any problem, we should see what.
I don't need my
Yeah.
My voice is strong. I completely agree with what you're saying. There must be researches, researchers and the papers, and I don't disagree or dispute that. Yeah. But I'm talking from the ground data.
Right.
I am talking from West Bengal data. There's a World Bank project. The project assessed the legacy dump sites and the contamination potential as of now. It must have happened month before, but you cannot undo that by now knowing what has been there. And my point is simple. Right now, the potential of contamination is virtually zero. What I'm not saying that should not be done, but I'm saying there's a priority. You are not doing enough for the existing or current waste management. You don't have the scientific lines inside, and you are spending huge amount of money because NGT being pushed by the government in a backhanded manner, and you spend on that. What is the priority? To consider the waste which is not being contaminated at the point of time, or to manage the waste which are right there? I'm talking about the priorities. You are saying from the researcher's point of view, I don't dispute that. But overall, it has to be considered the overall picture.
And it has to be, so in the last slide, I clearly mentioned that the management of fresh waste is something that should be taken place. Yes, we should not continue to. Yes, the fresh waste is also, yeah. So
many of the urban centers don't have space. So the counter point is to fill it up and then dump there. So what are the creating dumps and dumps and dumps and then creating new dumps? And you're saying we will be reading this dump. So you're reading few existing dumps and create new dumps.
What's the point?
No, we are not. We are not advocating.
You look at a 5-kilometer radius of area, you will find new insects. We have actually reported flies in our area.
Right.
In Kochi, we have only one dump site in Kerala, and the 5-kilometer radius, there is a fly which is much different from the usual and normally seen endemic fly. I don't think that kind of research has happened.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
The flies are different. They swarm in
the genetic evolution
Yeah,
happening because
it's a long-term impact, irreversible.
yeah,
I would just like to see your research on it. Okay.
I know. That's
Are there any
true.
more
So can you very quick? So I think we should, is there something that let Siddharth respond to once, and then we can take the conversation outside.
Yeah, I'll not take much of a time. I just give me 5 minutes. There are गिन के 5 सवाल हैं, ठीक है? So the first one by sir about data, right? So sir, I totally agree and empathize with you that we don't have data, right?
You had put a disclaimer there.
Absolutely, right? So in absence of data, you have to rely on what is available in the public domain. Right, secondary data, and the quantum of the problem is such that you can't really go to every city in India and try and quantify. Right, for someone in my capacity, it's difficult. So we have to rely on secondary data. But I totally agree with your point on the reliability of data that is put out by the agencies. About the issue of rag pickers, again, a very well thought point. In fact, most of our waste that we generate is handled by the rag pickers. Now, in my opinion, the study that CPCB did in 2015, जिसमें 9.5 million metric ton का generation बताया गया है, that's also an underestimate. Because most of the plastic waste is diverted through rag pickers to recycling facilities, so it never makes it to the dump site. So even the 9.5 is an underestimate. So how come we have climbed down from 9.5 to 3.3 something? That it's just not possible, right?
Population and consumption both have gone up.
Absolutely, and will continue to go up, right? The next one was about the use of plastic in cement industry. So I think there was a misunderstanding about the plastic is not used to make cement. The plastic is burned to extract the energy so that we can use less of coal. That's the idea. No, so that's for making roads. That's for making roads. That's a separate issue. But for cement, we do not mix plastic waste with our cement, right? So that's around it. Coming to your point, sir, we've moved from 20 to 120 microns in a period of 20 years. So lots of 20s. I think 1999 was when we moved from 20 microns.
In 2010, we went from 20 to 40. So 20 was still 20.
But we started in 99 using 20 microns. That's what my point is. So I just want to kind of clarify here that we don't know what the actual enforcement is going to be and or why we are increasing the amount of or the thickness of plastic and how will it affect the recyclability, right? In my opinion, we are using more and more raw materials, right? For making a 50 micron plastic and for making a 120 micron plastic, the amount of raw materials doubles up, right? Or in another scenario, I may use additives, higher amount of additives to increase the thickness of the plastic.
They're making 120, but they're not making 120.
So right now we are not supposed to make 120. Right now there's an interim of 75, right? But having said that, these two notifications around single-use plastic and the extended producer responsibility, and there's a third that has come in again in 2021, which kind of has mandated use of recycled plastic for food grade application, subject to FSSAI notification, right? So there are total 3 different amendments, 21 and 22. Now, you might be aware there's UNIA going on in Nairobi, right? So the entire world is contemplating on having a global treaty on how to tackle plastic pollution. So when at a country level, we make such announcement, it has a communication value across the globe that India is trying to tackle its plastic pollution. If you actually look at reports, they don't really come down to see the ground reality. They focus on what kind of policies does the nation have at a national level, right? So in my opinion, it has a communication value when we are saying that, you know, we are moving from a certain thickness to a higher thickness, or we are banning single-use plastic, or we are bringing in EPR. Now, as a country, we have struggled to implement and enforce these kind of policies.
So it doesn't look like a plastic management, it looks like perception management.
No, just
Which is also important.
Air pollution. Will Onumita be happy because India is making its standards stringent and doing nothing on ground? You are making your standards stringent, but doing nothing on ground on implementation. What's the point? In air pollution case, we have stronger and stronger kind of standard, and they are all forcing that we need to at least try to stick to it. But in plastic, there's nothing on ground.
Right.
But 2020, but on ground, there's nothing happening. That's my question. What is driving our internationally? You can show that I am making our standards stringent, but on ground we're not doing. This is not it.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with you. It's not acceptable, but the enforcement always has been a challenge because of the capacity of the urban local bodies, the capacity of officials in state pollution control board. So our team is also working on building capacity for these kind of people to help them understand what are the things they can do when they go back.
Great job. I think they are building capacity of them. They themselves created the norm, and they need a third agency to increase their capacity.
And I think the major challenge is the acceptance of the customer. They don't want to leave those fine micron polybags.
Yeah.
That is a very major challenge.
So before it ends, Anumita, may I just make a quick point?
Okay, so one question left on email.
Okay. I mean, the conversation was fascinating. So see, basically, you know, we are having probably the best of the environment journalists right here in this room. You know, the history of the solid waste management journey in India has been, I mean, I don't know what terms would I use to explain it. So this dump site of 1,300 million or 1,400 million, I don't know how much it's there, but we basically quote government figures, because once you quote a government figure, you are absolutely safe. There is no question, like you don't have to clarify anything. So that's the best advantage of using government figures.
True.
You know, the roadmap going forward, you know, SBM1 focused on open defecation, and now we are an official open defecation free country. Now we have Nigeria right next to us as an African country, being the second largest defecator. Now SBM2 has, at least at the policy level, they have shifted the focus to solid waste management in SBM 2.0, which was inaugurated October last year. A lot of issues have been, at least there has been an attempt to address those issues at the policy level, especially starting with the remediation of that dump site, because if you look at the number of PILs that are pending at the disposal of NGT, you practically cannot count them. So people have started protesting because these dump sites are, it's not that they have been closed, they're pretty much alive, right? And they have run out of space, as Richa has rightly pointed out. So the reason why government had to consider remediation of the existing dump site is just because of the public pressure. And if you look at the history, we had the first waste management regulation in our country in the year 2000. So that regulation itself provided the window to all the urban local authorities to simply collect and dump. So in the name of circular economy, we killed it. We collected and dumped it. Waste management, this term management has a connotation, right? When you convert your waste management system to a business model and you earn revenue out of it to sustain it. I'll just quickly refer a study done by Reserve Bank and the World Bank back in 2012. And that study, about a decade back, it established that the ULBs are struggling to, meet the operational expenditure of to provide this service, because they were just collecting and dumping. And the range of expenditure as compared to the total ULB budget varied from 20% to 60%. And the amount is even higher for bigger cities. You talked about Informal sector, right? Informal sectors have never really been provided with a level playing field. We don't know how many there are numbers. We keep on juggling around numbers. So the current estimation is hovering around 2 million plus. You take a look at the city of Pune in Maharashtra. Pune has a cooperative of waste pickers. It's called Swachh Pune, right? It's a cooperative of close to 4,000 waste pickers. They are managing the waste, collecting it, segregated waste from 850,000 sources every day. And they didn't miss the collection even during the pandemic, right? What is happening? The city have zero liability on this workforce. They are not getting paid a single penny by the urban local authorities. They are getting paid by the catchment area as user charges. Say one waste picker is collecting waste from 400 households. So he is getting the money as user charges from these 400 households. The segregated sellable waste, because they have their own aggregators network, right? And in India, if there is anything happening around circular economy, this is because of this amazing workforce that we don't even recognize in our policies, right? Pune has given, we have done a study, Richa has published a report on integration of informal sector. It is right there in the portal. I would urge you might all want to take a look at this. Pune is saving as much as 150 to 200 crore because there is expenditure and there is saving of expenditure. Both basically accounts for the money that you save. And if you compare the system that they have, they are getting segregated waste because these people are doing this for their survival. They are not salaried. They are not collecting and dumping mixed waste unlike any other city, right? This 2000 solid waste management rule, I'm just quoting the narrative, right? The way it is currently appearing, that in absence of an alternative, you can dump your waste in dump site. And in 2021, we are standing next to 1,300 million tons of legacy waste. So we have, in Delhi, people shouldn't be unhappy about we don't have mountains. We have now 3. Okay. So basically, these are on policy. I happen to study the policy globally on solid waste management. The countries like Sweden, Norway, fortunately, they are our partners as well. So they had started something, say, in 90s, and they're now getting the fruits of the initiative that they had started back then, right now. But what we have done, the damage has been done. There is absolutely no doubt about this. Now, whether we actually require to remediate this dump site or not is a different debate altogether. The point here is that in all these 20 years, ever since 2000, the first rule that we had, all the cities basically found that this is the most convenient option. So they started collecting and dumping. We have never been able to, this data that Siddharth has shared, that, if you look at the website of the Ministry of Urban, I'm not criticizing them. There is no data available even for a researcher, for institutions like ours, to even analyze and engage with the government that this is what we are finding. Swachh Sarvekshan is a classic example. We started Swachh Sarvekshan in 2016. I'll just wrap it up in 1 minute maybe. Swachh Sarvekshan started in 2016. It's the largest ever sanitation survey in the whole world, looking at the scale, right? If you pay attention to the methodology, because Swachh Sarvekshan introduced a ranking, a score-based ranking among cities. Wonderful, because it induced a sense of competition that I have to do better compared to what my neighbor is doing. If you look at the methodology, and if you cluster the questions that focusing on visual cleanliness versus sustainable sanitation or sustainable waste management, you will find something amazing. I wish I had time to show a couple of slides. So I'll give you a classic example. There are 4 pillars on which these studies are done. One of the pillars is citizens' feedback. So that pillar is asking a citizen, do you know your city is participating in Swachh Sarvekshan? If the answer is yes, the city gets 150 marks, right? On the other side, there's a question that what percentage of your wet waste is getting treated? You know how much the city is going to get? 100. So the focus is clear. We can't really blame the ULBs. We have dragged them into this rat race of, it should disappear from your courtyard and backyard. We don't really care about where it is going. And that's the reality. Cities are expanding, so the dump sites, when they were born, they were outside the city limit. But now they're inside the city limit, and this is how this pressure has been built on the government to remediate them. So I thought just making these quick points. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Fascinating, really. And I can see the interest. So, so now we take the conversation outside, but it is an intense conversation. Thanks a lot, Atin, and big hand to Siddharth and Richa. I'm so sorry you guys could not answer all the questions, but please continue the conversation. It's much needed. Thanks. Thanks a lot, everyone.
And please write about this issue.
Yes, sure to do.
That is how you can do the report. We are democratic and public.
Waste is our biggest need. Everyone takes suggestions. So all the annual